Hello and welcome to the Doc Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike DeLuke, and it's my mission to help you lead a happier, healthier, and more prosperous life, both personally and professionally. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Doc Podcast. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Tim Jai Baker. We're going to have a very interesting conversation about how we create both financial and personal richness and fulfillment in our lives. Jai is the CEO of Luminous Wealth and the author of the book, The Awakened Investor. He is a veteran of the financial advisory industry, and his mission is to guide his clients toward their deepest desires and true fulfillment by fostering a healthy, stress-free environment where financial and personal well-being are seamlessly integrated. Jai believes that wealth management should not occur in isolation, but instead should be part of a holistic approach that takes into account our deep psychological and emotional ties to money. I am really excited to bring you this conversation as we not only talk about how our mindset impacts material wealth, but how our spiritual health and well-being impacts every facet of our lives. Also, if you know anyone else who may benefit from hearing my discussion with Jai, please be sure to share the show with them. So without further ado, let's get on to today's episode with Jai Baker. Enjoy the show, everybody. Welcome to the Doc Podcast, Jai.
Mike, thanks for having me on your show today. Looking forward to our chat.
Same here. My pleasure. And I am really excited to have you on. As my audience knows, I do a lot on the wellness side as well as on the financial side. And we're going to talk about all of that in one capacity or another with you today. And my goal really is to help people live a better life personally and professionally. And the professional is very important, but I feel it's also important to get into the discussions of how we advance ourselves personally. So before we get into talking about that in a little more detail, I love hearing people's stories. You have a really cool story and journey. Tell me a little bit more about how you got to be the Jai Baker you are today.
Wow, that's a lot of years. But I grew up in Hampton, Virginia, which is on a peninsula there in the southeastern part of Virginia. There's Williamsburg, Newport News, Hampton. Spent most of my time in Williamsburg on a golf course growing up. And I was raised by a family I call a Leave It to Beaver family. I mean, I had a great upbringing, great atmosphere. Of course, there's going to be some dramas in life when you're teenagers, but great mom and dad. They had, one marriage. That's part of life success. If that marriage is a great partnership, it's not necessarily great to be living all your life with a partner if it's in turmoil, right? Mm-hmm. That's not something to admire, but I was fortunate to be able to have one that my parents were married all their lives together, and they were, best friends. And so it was a great atmosphere to grow up in. I had a younger brother, older brother, but my time spent in Williamsburg led me to a golf scholarship at University of South Carolina in the late 70s. And I had a lot of success early on with golf. I had a great instructor. He was a great player in his own right. And one of the mottos I remember from that relationship with him was, always be the best that you can be at whatever you do. He didn't say be the best at it, be the best you can be at it. Because you can't control what other people do. You can only control what you do. And so I had scholarship offers. I knew where I was going to college when I was in 10th grade. From my early successes with golf. And then after graduating, I played pro for a year, but I had gotten married in college. And during that year of playing pro, I would get the question from my wife, hey, don't you want to get a real job? And at the end of that year, we had a child already. I got a real job and it became my career. But I started out in the insurance industry. I was with Prudential Insurance Company in Columbia, South Carolina. I was a rookie agent of the year, and I hated my job. But it was a great time to understand and be involved in that industry, because in February 1981, we had 10% unemployment, 10% inflation, 21% money market yields. 19.45% 30-year mortgage rates.
Wow.
So when I hear people now talk about, this high 7%
Mm-hmm.
mortgage environment, I'm going, well, you just don't know.
It's all relative, right?
But because interest rates were so high, the insurance company was forced to develop contracts that would pay you current interest earnings on your cash value. And so they were paying around 14% on their index on their universal life policies. They were forced to develop variable life contracts because people were wanting to invest their cash in stock markets. And so it was watching how that insurance watch was made that actually carried my knowledge for my whole career. Through the years, I advised our clients on their insurance exposure, but I wound up dropping my licenses because I didn't want to have there be any conflicts of interest in making recommendations around insurance contracts. But after the Prudential insurance experience, I joined a financial planning firm. So this was in the 1980s. And that was really the infancy of financial planning. But we had a CPA in the hallways of our offices. We had an attorney that was in our building as well that we worked with and developed financial plans. But in the early infancy, back in the 80s, the products that were recommended were mainly commission-based products. Back then, the recommendations were around solving tax issues. I mean, back then, we were in the early days, we had 70% top marginal tax rates. But a person could zero out paying taxes if they structured their investments in the right way. And so it was all tax driven. And Reagan came in and with the tax reforms changed all of that. And by reducing the benefits of depreciation schedules and the length of depreciation schedules and write-offs, it lopped off the valuation of all commercial real estate by 30% overnight. That's when we had the Ohio S&Ls running the problems, and the country went through a $500 billion S&L bailout back then. What people don't know, though, is after the bailout, those S&Ls eventually recovered some way. And so it wasn't a $500 billion hit, but it was still a $150 billion hit to our government and to us, the citizens, paying for that. And so I had 7 years with a financial planning firm. I learned how that watch was made. And then I went to work with a Wall Street firm, Legg Mason Wood Walker, which was a regional firm out of Baltimore. Great company, a great value system within the culture of Legg Mason. But after 7 years with them, I got pulled away by Prudential Securities. And there was two areas of my work that were expanding that I thought Prudential Securities was really the premier securities firm to be able to help me in that area of work. Well, they were a decentralized organization at that time, and as soon as I joined them, they became a centralized organization. And so I couldn't even find the departments or the people that I was relying on to help me with the work that I was doing. And so I remember calling in my office one day, and when I'm calling in and the phone rang 20 times and was never picked up. And I was thinking, well, the only way I can control the quality of experience that my clients can have is to own my own firm and own it. And so after 16 months of being with Prudential Securities, I left to start my own firm. Back then it was Baker Capital Advisors, and I promoted it as a multi-generational financial planning firm with just me and an assistant. And that was quite when I look back on it, most people would say, boy, that's really risky. In fact, the Prudential Security guys, there was 30 some people in my office. And so the morning that I left, all 30 of those guys got on the telephone with every client that I had back then and said, he's trying to go out there and be an independent guy. And those little guys, they just don't make it very often. You're going to go with the losing ship there. Well, it wasn't but a couple years later that I'm still in business and Prudential Securities is out of business. But was interesting that I was really blessed and fortunate that all those clients, not a one didn't come with me. So all of them came over. But it was, for me, quite an undertaking because actually when I joined Prudential Securities, they paid me an $80,000 bonus to join them. And this is back in 1996. During that time, I had a 16-year-old daughter that I was raising on my own. And as teenagers are, they need some help other than the parents. And so we were going to therapy together, and then I wound up having to send her to a boot camp out in Idaho, Glacier National Park one year. So, and the other thing that I experienced when I was at Prudential Securities was I was able to garner the work of a large hospital retirement plan. So I was managing a $50 million retirement plan, but I got it through the leads of Prudential Securities. And so when I left Prudential Securities to start my own work, I knew I was going to leave behind a $50 million account. I knew I was going to be paying back an $80,000 bonus. I had already spent about $70,000 on my daughter. And so I borrowed some monies at 30% interest rates to get my new work, my own independent way of working in the world up and started. And I have to tell you, I had no fear. I had no fear of what was going to happen with that. I just put my head down and went to work. And then I was blessed through the years with the people that we worked with that it flourished into something really nice. So I started out as Baker Capital Advisors. And what's interesting was I had started my meditation practice back in 1997. And that coincides with the founding of Baker Capital Advisors. So there was a great awakening in every aspect of who I was at that time.
Did you just, something you just heard about? Did you read about? How did you, I mean, because now meditation with podcasts, and it's certainly something people are more familiar with, but mid-90s, that wasn't exactly the case. So how did you?
Well, I stumbled on, I was taking a course. It was a course that was on cassette tapes by Tony Robbins.
Yep.
And at the very end of these tapes, he had some guy named Dr. Deepak Chopra, this little Indian dialect sounding guy. And so he piqued my interest, and so I bought a book of his. And at the end of the book, he had in one paragraph, he had this little comment about something called meditation. So I noted that, but if you buy one of Deepak's book, you can't just buy one. You have to buy another. He's one of the most prolific writers I've ever read books from. And in fact, some of his books, you can like open up any page and it's rich with information, just the page that you go to. You don't have to start from finish to end, but that's the natural order. But so I bought the second book, and he did the same thing. At the end of the book, he mentioned something about this meditation thing. So I got curious, and I started coming home after work, sitting on the hearth of my fireplace, and just closing my eyelids and staring at the back of my eyelids, and I would just repeat silently to myself, "Thy will be done." And I would do this for about 15, 20, 30 minutes each day. And after a couple of weeks of that, I said, I want to know how this is really done. I want to really know how to do meditation, the techniques and whatnot. And so I went to Chopra's website, and he had a teacher in Bedford, Virginia. It was about 2 hours away from where I was living. So I went up there for a 3-day weekend, and I was indoctrinated into the process and given my unique mantra. And so after 3 days, I come home, and I was meditating an hour in the morning, hour in the afternoon before I would leave the office. And prior to this, 9 months earlier, I was playing a round of golf, and on the 14th hole, I swung the club, and it felt like a knife went through my left shoulder blade. And I couldn't finish the rest of the round. So I went back home and got physical therapy for 30, 60 days. I went to Martina Navratilovan's personal trainer. She did acupuncture with the electric needles on me. It felt good while she was applying it, but it didn't help it materially in any way. And then I went to an orthopedic surgeon, and he put the foot-long needle in my shoulder, and he said, ice it down for the next 2 weeks. And if there's no improvement, he said, I'll go in there and scrape out the underside of your shoulder blade so your arm can can move around in there freely. Well, after 2 weeks, it wasn't any better, but I wasn't excited about getting cut on. And I mean, I had stopped lifting weights. I couldn't even put on a suit coat. And when I'm driving my car and I'm holding the steering wheel with 2 hands, there was a dull pain in my left shoulder. Well, 9 months went by. I iced it down for a half hour every night. And then that's when I embarked on this inquiry about meditation. And I wasn't looking for any benefits of meditation. I just wanted to understand it. And like I said, after 3 days of meditating an hour in the morning and afternoon, I was driving home, and all of a sudden I realized this left shoulder, there's no dull pain there. And I get home, I start moving around, I start doing a couple of push-ups, I put my suit coat back on, and I haven't had an issue with it since. And that was in 1997.
Wow.
And so, meditation provides so many benefits. And
Yeah, why do you think, knowing what you know now and the journey you've been on, why do you think that was the case?
So, what is the definition of meditation? To you, what would you say meditation is?
Blocking out surrounding noise and distractions and focusing more on your inner self and your inner being.
That's really close. The definition is to become familiar with. Familiar with what? The light that you've been incarnated into this physical body from. And what it's doing is it's bringing light to all 60 trillion cells in your body, bringing homeostasis and balance back to those. And you don't even have to have any intentions for that to happen. You've just tapped into your perfect source of light, and it's bringing perfection back into this physical body just by sitting with it and running that energy through you. Dr. Joe Dispenza is doing some great work in the United States with meditation, and he has a research company, Inner Science Research. It's doing studies now on the impact of the body and diseases using meditation. And they're studying 63 different diseases, and they're comparing it with the Western medicine solution in each one of these diseases. And they're coming out with a paper soon that's going to be mind-blowing to the public about the benefits in virtually every aspect of our lives with meditation. But for me, it's changed my life. It's become my way of living. It's not just, I do it on weekends. A lot of people will say, it's hard. And I will say, well, it's hard till it's not. I'll do it at least every morning and sometimes more than that. But it's a way of life. It's like, waking up and brushing your teeth. It has to be it. And because what I realize is, most people call those churches or those buildings temples. And what I know to be is this body that we have, this is the temple. And you need to be in church 24/7. This is the way to do it. It's not going for a couple hours a week to some building that I call a meeting place. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that, but when you leave that building or that meeting place, you need to embody that practice and those teachings that you came out of there with. And what happens is, somebody comes out of those places and they get back on the interstate and somebody cuts them off and they're flipping them off in their car.
Yep.
That's not embodying what you just learned.
Yep.
And so that's what we've lost, I think, as a society. We're disconnected from our soul. We're disconnected from source, and we feel like we're just this skin encapsulated bag of bones with these dulled down 5 senses, and we're trying to make our way with just that clump of matter. And so people that are unconscious in that way, they don't feel connected with their non-physical self. They'll have this economic pie in front of them. They'll only see one slice left, and everybody's just, killing everybody else to get it. But the conscious person says, go ahead and take it. I'm just going to make another pie. So because the conscious person feels connected, they have faith and they have knowing that they're beyond this physical matter, and they can trust that. They know that consciousness has their back.
It's such a deep area, one that I'm learning more about as I'm going on my own journey and have gone on my own journey. There's a few things you mentioned that I want to just highlight because it's such a similar undercurrent to so many of the people with whom I speak, especially people who have achieved levels of success and prosperity in their lives, which is why I love the journey. And after this, I'll let you finish the part of how you got to transition from your initial financial firm into what you're doing more today. It's just so apparent that so many of us who go down this path, and the longer you live, this does take time to develop, whether it's wisdom or knowledge or whatever you want to label it as, the seasons of life. You lived multiple seasons. I just gave a lecture to some of the residents at NYU in the ortho program the other day. And I was talking to them about the seasons of life and the fact that it's okay that there are different seasons. Each season you learn something from and you grow from, and you face the next season better prepared and better able to, if you learn from it, right? If that's the goal, we want to learn from that season and come out of it stronger and better and at a different spot where we're able to grow into the next season. And I feel like so often people dwell on that previous season or 2 seasons ago or 3 seasons ago, and they can't focus on the present of what they're doing and realize in every season there is an ability to prosper and grow and succeed. It might be different in each season, but it doesn't mean it's not possible. The other thing is the taking of risks. You took tremendous risks each time you changed professions within your career path and your career track, moving from one firm to another firm or within the same general sense of business. It wasn't like you were going from accounting to engineering. That being said, you were still taking a tremendous risk as you transitioned. And then ultimately, how old were you about in the mid-90s, if you don't mind sharing, when you made that change to your own firm?
Well, in 97, I would have been 39.
Yeah, so 39 years old, you have a family, and you take that type of leap. And I want to highlight that because so many of the young docs with whom I speak and teach and coach feel like the decision they make when they walk out of their residency has to be the right opportunity right away. There's no room for failure, and it's going to be the practice opportunity. And so they do they go with a corporate or a bigger firm? Like you were talking about, you have Prudential or one of the bigger firms. Do they do their own thing? Do they try to do both? What I would encourage people is, if you don't know yourself, and why I always tell people, what's your vision? Who are you 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Where do you want to be personally, not just financially, spiritually, as a human in this world? Then you really need to define that a little bit first. So clearly, even though you maybe couldn't have, I don't know this, but maybe you couldn't have vocalized it or written it down, you were starting to go on a journey to realize, and probably knew, who you really ultimately wanted to be, even if it was subconscious, and you were working towards something greater. And I just encourage all the younger professionals out there listening to this to keep that open mind to what this journey is. And as long as you're trying to be a better version of yourself, it might look different as you go through life. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And your comment about being the best version of yourself that you can be each day is the secret to it all.
Right.
And also, I agree that probably the most important thing that we can do for ourselves is to know thyself. To know thyself is to know all of reality. You know that you are part of reality, because this is, to me, in my terms, this world is a Maya. It's an illusion, and we're having this dance. We're having this Leela in this illusion, in this physical body. But reality is what's permanent. Consciousness is what's permanent, and you're going to find in that present moment eternity. That's where eternity is. And too many people spend all of their time with their mind looking at the past, thinking about the future, and they're missing the present right here. And that's where you can perform. That's where you can be your best. And it gets back to that comment that my coach in golf gave me growing up. It's be the best you can be at whatever you're doing. And that sounding board gave me confidence in whatever I was doing. So I knew that I could, I was being the best I could be at golf, and I achieved great things with that. And so I knew I could carry on in another occupational area, and just by being the best I could be at that, I was going to succeed because I loved doing what I was doing. I mean, that's finding your purpose, right? It's contemplating and finding out what your true interests are, and not what the interests of other people that came before you want you to be.
Or the people on social media, or the people who, right? I feel we're so inundated with the pressures, and well, we turn it into pressures. We're inundated with the information of what everyone else is doing, that shapes our reality of who we think we should be. Yeah. And in that, I really do feel like we lose our sense of self.
Yeah, I've been really good in my life about putting blinders on, like you have horse race, putting those blinders on what I'm doing, and not looking to see even what my competition's doing. I mean, I used to have Goldman Sachs and Vanguard and these other giant investment firms visit our offices trying to get some business from us. And they said, you're doing something very unique here. Who's your competition? I go, I don't know. Because I'm not looking out there to see what other people are doing. What I was doing was using my client meetings as my laboratory, and it was a feedback loop for me to understand what else I needed to provide them to enhance their wealth journey.
Yeah.
So I was just always focused on me and studying my work and my clients. To your other point about taking risk and developing your career and being concerned about the potential pit holes and all of this, I mean, it was even more than that for me from what I described about leaving Prudential and borrowing money and knowing these things I was leaving. I moved to Winston-Salem, North Carolina for my career. Well, I came from Hampton, Virginia. My dad worked at Amoco Oil Refinery. He was a supervisor there. My mom was a stay-at-home mom till my younger brother was 13. She was very involved in the community, but at that age, she went to work for Virginia National Bank and was a loan officer there. So, and my whole town was pretty much a blue-collar type of arena. Now, I didn't think of myself that I didn't have riches. I mean, I had everything that I needed to have growing up. I didn't lack anything. But when I went into Winston-Salem, if you think about this, I didn't know anybody. I didn't know one person when I went to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And in Winston-Salem, there was not an even economic strata. It was heavy, wealthy people there, skinny middle class, a lot of service people, because you had Wake Forest University, North Carolina Baptist Medical Center, so they're cranking out all these attorneys, all these doctors, and then you had RJR Tobacco. What a mix there, right? Healthcare and tobacco. And then we did have a company there, Sarah Lee. So you had all these executives at these high-powered companies, along with doctors and attorneys. And so it was, to me, I thought it's pretty much a blue blood town, not a blue collar town. And so for a kid to come in there with my background, not knowing anybody, and to create through the years where I was working with, at the end, I was working with 155 families. 80% of them were in the medical field, doctors, execs at hospitals, CEOs of publicly traded companies. I was working with hospitals themselves, and I was managing nearly $400 million in assets, and I never marketed. I never paid an advertising dollar. Everything was referral. So you can imagine, I graduated with a marketing degree, and I didn't like to get on the telephone to call people up to do business. And I would only take a referral. And so I thought if I did a really great job with this one client I have, certainly they'll refer me to somebody else. And that's what happened. So I grew my business very organically through the years. It was just me and an assistant. And then through my laboratory of meetings, I brought in a CPA. And then you can't have just one CPA. So when revenues grew, I hired another CPA on staff. Then I hired an attorney on staff, then other wealth advisors, client service liaison. And before I sold my practice 4 years ago, I brought in an Ayurvedic practitioner for mind, body, spirit work. But we were fee-only advisors. And we had pretty much, without me knowing about the model, I had replicated the model of a family office. But mine was a multi-family office. And They had never experienced a multidisciplinary office of professionals like that in one location that were working together every day together. It was only those families that had at a minimum $25 million in net worth and above that had ever been exposed to that type of service offering in the wealth management field. So for the longest time, I had a unique offering in the marketplace. And I would suggest still is today that way. It's starting to come around where you're getting partnerships like that in play. But it was very unique to do that in the late 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah, it is amazing. And it hopefully is inspiring to people out there to see that you can do what you want to do. And when we first spoke and we were getting acquainted with one another, I was struck by how similar our stories are in so many different ways, as far as having different paths. Obviously, I'm the medical orthodontic side. You were in the financial arena. The fact, though, that we had these thriving practices and we decided to walk away from them and go in a different direction at a point at which most people would probably say, I'm sure you were told, I know I was told, you are crazy to be walking away from this thing you have built. The other part of that I want to highlight is I built it the same way you did. I focused on patient relationships. The only marketing I did was sponsoring local teams, and I love doing that anyway, giving to local baseball teams and organizations locally, schools, et cetera. I don't know that I hardly ever turned anything down from kids when they needed funds for their activities. I didn't market. I wasn't advertising or putting ads out there. I'm not saying that no one should. I'm just saying I didn't need to. My focus was I'm going to generate internal marketing workflows so that we are so good at what we do internally that word of mouth will grow the practice. And it did. It grew it organically, and it grew it into something that was very profound and powerful because it wasn't based on someone seeing a billboard or a sign. It was based on their friend or their neighbor or their relative saying, hey, I had this really great experience and you should go check it out. And it sounds like that's exactly what you were able to do. So I say this because of the young docs out there or young professionals listening. It seems like the quick, easy way to do it, to just go out and market and get all these people coming in your door. There's something to be said for doing it organically. And the other thing is you've got to be ready when you hit that critical mass. And for me, I was able to, by developing and honing my systems little by little, as my practice grew, I'm sure you did the same, you're learning as you go. And like you said, well, now I need a CPA. Well, now I need another one. You're kind of growing it organically, as opposed to you get all these people rushing in at once. You don't have the systems to sustain it. You don't have maybe the ability to sustain that type of volume just from a sheer manpower or team power issue. And then you might end up compromising your quality because you're constantly having to try to service all these people. So I just put it out there as everyone sees like the big practice in my arena or your arena is great. They're big and numbers. Don't be afraid to be the little guy or gal out there starting and working it up. And we'll talk a little bit about the financial side because you can't just be reckless with your money. But the other part that I want to touch on with what you did, you said you brought in a spiritual advisor. So I want to highlight, some people might have heard that, or if they're on the bike or working out or driving, they might not have caught that. I want to just go back to that and say, why did you, and when did you do that in this process? And what made you think that I'm in the financial arena and I should have a spiritual advisor? So if you just talk me through that a little.
Sure. Well, I mean, through the years, I never evangelized about my own spiritual journey. The only thing that ever gave anything away about me was for 24 years, I signed my quarterly letters and any other letters that I would go out on white papers. I would sign them Namaste. And Namaste means the great perfection within me honors the great perfection within you. And so for some people, I was their Buddhist brother. Some people, I was their Hindu brother. Other people, I was just their brother. But I never evangelized it. But somewhere around 7 or 8 years ago, I had one of my clients call me up. He is a radiologist, out of the blue. His first words to me, as soon as I said hello, he said, I pray, I don't meditate. I said, Jack, that's great. I said, I hope you have some prayers for me. I said, I fully appreciate people's prayers. And then about a year goes by and he retired and he calls me up again. And he says, we've had meetings before then, but just this is kind of how it went with this part of the conversation. And he says, I've been retired for a year. I go, yeah, I know, we've been sending you checks every month. He said, and now I've been able to do some things and contemplate on some things that I couldn't do when I was so busy with my work. And he said, I think I would like for you to teach me to meditate. And he says, and I also know that you know that we can heal our own bodies. And he says, I'm getting ready to go have knee surgery. Maybe you can help me with that too. Well, in the same week, I got this phone call from the 74-year-old child psychologist. And I'd worked with her and her husband for 30 years. For 30 years, every 3 months on a Friday at lunch, I would meet with the two of them in their offices. He was also a psychologist. And we had a great rapport. What great people these folks were. But she had lost her husband about 5 years before she had called me up this particular week. And I'd had a chance, I was blessed that I had a lunch with him about a week before he passed. He had a very rare known cancer, and he knew he was about to check out. And his comment to me, he says, if I can just impart anything to you, he said, just let it go. He said, if I were to just, in my life, let things go, life would have been so much easier. And so when you think about that, though, let go of what? And what we're letting go of is our ego, our psyche. That's, trying to control everything. But anyway, so she calls me up and she comes and set up a meeting with me. And she said, he passed 5 years ago. I don't want to mention his name. He passed 5 years ago, and until now, I've always felt still connected with him, even though he's physically not here. And she says, I'm starting to lose that. And she says, I saw all through the years how you two were so much in sync with each other, sharing the books and having the same kind of languaging around spirituality and whatnot. And she was never excluded. I mean, she was right there with us, right? She was not somebody who was quiet sitting in the corner. This little lady she was a pilot of her own airplane. So very strong woman. But she said, I think that if you would teach me to meditate, I could maybe regain that connection that I'm starting to lose with my husband. And so there were these two things, and then I noticed through the years that I was thinking during my career, as long as we're meeting or exceeding people's financial goals in this journey, and I'd been working with some of them for more than 30 years, so I saw this whole life process from their mid-career to retiring and into the retirement years. I thought certainly they would be contented and enjoying life, and what I found out was they weren't. My wealthiest client was my most stressed out client. In fact, in his career, he had been inflicted with Bell palsy, and just half his face collapsed now. And he wound up retiring, and fortunately for him and everyone around him, he had full recovery of his face. And you would have never known that he ever had it. But, and again, it gets back to that laboratory, this feedback loop, right? I'm thinking I want to be able to provide a team that's going to solve this issue with humanity. And so that's what's led me to the work that we're doing now. Because as a society, I've been able to witness over the last 60 years, we've just become disconnected from our souls. We're disconnected from Source, God, whatever way you envision your non-physical self, something that's greater than you. And I just want to be that nudge agent and be there for that person who says, yeah, I think I want a little guidance here. I need a little support in this area, and to have a team to do that, because I'm never going to convince anyone of anything. I'm never going to evangelize anything to anyone. But the best way that we can do this is to be the example. Being an example of what you're saying should happen is far better than trying to tell people based on some theory or some book or some idea. It reminds me when I first started my deep meditation techniques in '98 with Dr. Deepak Chopra. We went to Wollongong, Australia for 8 days, and we'd meditate 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. And anyway, after that week, you can imagine, I felt like I was on drugs. I felt loopy. I was just like floaty. And Deepak said, now when you go back home, I know you're going to want to evangelize to all your friends that you need to start meditating. He says, you don't need to do that. We're not going to save anybody from anything. Nobody's going to go burn in hell for eternity. But I understand why he said that because of the culture that we live in. But when I came back from that trip, I went to some social parties at Christmas time because that was the time of the year it was. I can't tell you how many people came up to me and said, what are you doing different? Did you lose some weight? What are you doing different? Mm. And then that gives me an opportunity to share, my recent experiences. Mm. So that's how we live. I think that's how we support our work. That's how we provide messaging for our work, is to be that example of it. And then people might be inspired by that, right? Provide some insight to them and how their lives can be lived in a better way. Because I find that stress permeates our culture.
Yes. And money at the center of that, I have to say, in a lot of ways. So how did you navigate that side of it? You dealt with a lot of, as you said, physicians and attorneys, and you were dealing with a lot of professionals in your line of work. Was there anything that stood out to you in their approach to money, their attitude toward money? And even if it wasn't their attitude towards money, say their way they interacted with their spouse or significant other about money, the way they talked about money as it pertained to their children. What are some of these things that are dissociating ourselves from that inner peace, that inner self, that are you could maybe attribute to money, and what do we do about that?
Well, first I have to comment that a couple of years ago I was invited to this event. There's 20 other firms there, and the speaker that day led off with the thesis that money is the biggest stressor in America. And everybody's heads were nodding yes to that except mine. And I raised my hand. I said, no, it's not. He said, do you want to say more? Because I was there. I just blew up his thesis for the day. And I said, it's your mind. Master your mind. You master your money issues. You master your career issues. Master your health issues. Master your relationship issues. Master your emotional intelligence issues. And you're tapped into source energy. So that is the causal reason for everything that gets expressed in this human experience. It's your mind. I mean, how can you have some people, go through a recession and they go bankrupt while others earn fortunes? It's your mindset with every aspect of who you are and everything that you do and everything that you interplay in this dance with people. Most of my clients were making anywhere from, towards the end there, making anywhere from $350, $400 on the low end to $1 million, $1.2 a year. That's hard to mess up when you're cranking that out every year. Of course, when you think about people like Mike Tyson, he was worth $400 million and he went bankrupt. But look, we come into this world programmed. So whether you believe in reincarnation or not, it doesn't matter. You know that you came in with this ancestral DNA. And then we're in mom's womb for 9 months and we're taking on her emotions, her chemistry. And then we come out in the first 7 years of our life, we're living in a theta frequency. Our mind is at theta. And that's the state of hypnosis. So we can't say no to anything in our environment. We accept our totality of the environment as truth. And so during those 7 years and thereafter, we've become the garbage bin of everybody else's desires and limitations and our experiences, both good and bad, in our lives. And then at age 7, our mind forms a beta frequency. And this is how you and I are communicating right now. I can say something and you go, I disagree with that. But before 7, you can't do that. We're in theta. And so I say this because, when we're talking about the medical community, there was a lot of good programming in there, right? In order, you grew up with a good background, nice intelligence, you went through the finest universities in America, you became disciplined, having to go through all that rigorous study and school through the years. And so you got a lot going on for you. But the other aspect of that is when you get into your work, you're so busy and it stimulates you because you've been doing this all your career. You're stimulated, but you're also out of balance with all the other potential aspects of your life. You're not able to spend all that time with your kids and your spouse. And you get out of balance in not having the hobbies and other social abilities that a lot of other people have the time to do. So you become very narrow in your balance with career, and everything else is sacrificed because of that. And so the money issue for our clients, it was really more a matter of harnessing it in a way that we can maximize the benefits of our bounty, the benefits of our work, and to get the most out of it. And because they could squander it and still get by just fine. But it's those who are also wanting to respect their resources and their hard work in the very best way, that they made sure that they had teams around them of wealth advisors that could support them, and that their family were supported in other ways when they couldn't necessarily be there. So the challenge really is for not just doctors, but all humanity, is managing the stress, and the stress is caused by your mind. And then we have other individualistic issues based on our occupations and amount of resources that we earn. But to say, I like to abide by the universal principles, and universal principles will say they apply when it is applied to all people everywhere through all of time. And so for somebody to say you need to have money, well, I would agree with that, but that doesn't follow a universal principle.
Yeah.
And the reason why we have to have the monies that we're needing to have right now is because we're looking outside of ourselves and we're tick-tocking around the world, right? And we're not focused on what we're doing. And that's what you were mentioning earlier in this talk here. Stay focused on what you are doing, and don't look outside of that. Don't look to see that the guy down the street has got this gadget and you don't. You may be able to use your gadgets better than him, and it makes the patient outcome that much better. He's just trying new stuff all the time, and he never becomes a master of any of it.
Yep. It's so true. It's something that is the temptation, right? To see, we always want to see what others around us are doing. And I've often said that when I grew up, before the technology age, you didn't know where your neighbors went on vacation. I mean, maybe they would come back and say like, oh, we went to Florida, right? Now you're like with your neighbors on vacation. You're at the pool with them. You're at the beach with them. You're at the amusement park with them. And it's hard. I'm not a big social media fan. It's been a struggle for me on the new business promotion side with the coaching company, because I just don't inherently love it. I understand that it's great because it can get a message out, but I feel like we do get inundated with all of this information. We don't know how to filter it out. It's too much for us to process. And then it clouds our judgment, and it prevents us from finding our true self and what our purpose is. It's why when I talk to young docs and teach and coach, and to my own kids, they'll tell you, I say, what does 20-year you look like? Who are you? And it's just to start to get them trying to think about who they are and what really brings them happiness and fulfillment. How do you recommend people do that for themselves and for their kids? How do you help people on that journey to block out some of the noise and focus on finding who they are and who their true self is?
Well, I love your point, because access to information doesn't equal the wisdom to know what to do with it. And we do need to have that filter, that wisdom. We don't have to go out to the store to find out what's in the store anymore and then go buy it after we get there and find out that we like it. We're sitting at home and Amazon's sending you messages all day long. Based on your buying habits, we think you ought to buy this now. I mean, we don't have to go anywhere or see anything else that we want. Now we're being inundated with this stuff. And so it gets back to that, if you're trying to find your authentic self, I mean, we actually have on our website, and I offer this for free. It's a human archetype assessment. And it's based on the Carl Jung body of work, where we're placed in major groups of personas with our personalities and traits and qualities, but then it drills down into the unique thumbprint of who you are. And you can go to our website at luminouswealth.com, click on the banner Human Archetype Assessment, and you'll get a 46 question assessment to answer. You'll need about 15 minutes to do it, and you'll need a quiet space.
Okay.
But most importantly, there's no wrong answers. And so just move through that, and you'll get a report right away. And in addition to that, you'll get even a couple of videos to describe the qualities and attributes of who you are. And this is actually the first thing that I do when I'm meeting a potential client of ours in our work. We do these archetype assessments to help, because in our field of work, it's always been from a compliance standpoint, know your client. Well, you could ask client all kind of questions that you wanted to, and you still wouldn't know them because they don't know themselves.
Yep.
And by going through this type of work, this study, the client knows themselves. And we also have access, and we discuss the study with the client. Now we know the client. The client knows themselves, we know themselves. We can then start to understand their philosophies, their goals of their authentic lives, and we can step into their shoes with our multidisciplinary team of professionals and experience and implement from their family mission statement. This is their values and their desires in life. And so that's the best way that we can execute these strategies for the people we're working with. But these studies, this human archetype study, is between that and then developing a family genogram, are the two most fun things that I do. They're the most revealing things that we do, and they're most healing things that we do in working with families. I mean, I've seen relationships change just by the virtue that these two partners do this archetype assessment, and they start to see these 8 different factors and these 32 sub-factors of their qualities and traits of who they are as a human being, that they came into this, and it's revealing who they were programmed as. They were programmed to be these qualities. And so it helps some of these couples think, well, he doesn't trust me. And they're thinking it's just her that he's not trusting. Well, he's just not trusting by nature, and these studies will show that. It'll show all these contrasts of who we are, and now we're not taking our subjective minds to say, oh, you're this or you're that. No, we've revealed through our own qualities and our own programming who we are. This is very subjective. Nobody's painted you a certain way, and now we can start to understand, wow, I thought this partner of mine was doing things just to piss me off. But no, that's just who they were programmed to be. They can't help it. And what the study also does, it not only reveals those qualities and traits and attributes that serve us in great ways, but it also then reveals the blind spots, those biases that we can't see. And these, because I know all of life is a fractal. It's infinite repeating patterns of information. You see it in the cosmos, you see it in nature, and you see it in the human behavior pattern. And we keep having these outcomes that aren't serving us very well in our life. And we keep wondering, everywhere I go, I'm having the same outcome. These people are creating these things. It's the outer world doing it to us. But no, it's us doing it to us. And we don't see this behavior pattern in us because we're so much of that. Fire doesn't know itself to be hot. Water doesn't know itself to be wet. We're so much of that pattern that we can't see it. And a lot of times I'll bring these couples in and I'll say, how'd you feel about the study? And they go, well, 95% of it was really right on point. But this other 5%, these traits, that's not me at all. And usually the spouse across the table has this big grin on their face. And they got their finger pointing. They're going, that's exactly who you are.
Yep. It's so fascinating. I love that side of the social sciences and understanding who we are and why we are. And it's a journey. Just like we were talking about, the career is a journey. Finding out who you are and understanding who you are is a journey. And I find that I'm not all the way there for sure, but as I start to find out more who I am, it makes a lot of things more clear, and I'm able to stay a lot more focused on where I want to go because I'm not trying to figure out and dancing back and forth. But that does require putting some blinders on sometimes. That does require not being so concerned about what every person around you thinks about you or says about you. You have to find out who you are. And once you get really comfortable in your skin, all of that accessory noise becomes less important to you, I have found, and with people with whom I've spoke. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. But we usually find out who we are and the cause of these issues of life when we have a pain event.
Mm.
We have that heart attack and even then we don't change who we are, but that gives you the first chance to become that new personality. If you want a different reality, you're going to have to become a different personality. But what most people want, they don't want to change, but they want a different outcome. That just is insane. That's just not matching up. But we don't have to have that pain event in order to have a different reality. We can just consciously become aware of what's deep inside you that's calling you to express itself or to experience here in life. And know that you're going to have to start doing something different with your daily routines in order to have that. Maybe you have to go back for some additional training. Maybe it's taking another field altogether. Maybe it's just some other aspect of your daily routine that's going to make you better. But, for me, beyond the career, what you have to have is an everyday part of your life is that time in silence. And in that silence is where you can then start to reveal yourself to you. You don't need a human archetype assessment report. But not many people are used to that. We haven't been trained to be that way in our society. Somebody asked me not too long ago, what's the difference between prayer and meditation? And I said, prayer is when you're talking to God. Meditation is when God's talking to you. So in that silence, and I would suggest people to do it much more than 15 minutes, which is a lot of the recommendations I hear, because in the first 15 minutes, you can imagine you're thinking about what you got to do next or what happened just the day before.
You're filtering out the distraction.
And you're still in that beta mind. You don't reach that silence until you get beyond those conversations. Now, once you reach that and you drop out of beta into alpha and into theta, now you're reaching that no time, no place, nowhere, no thing. Now you're in the void, and now you're tapping into your higher self, the information, the light of your higher self, and it is speaking to you. And in that silence is where the changes are made.
Do you feel that a belief in a higher power, God, something greater than you, is an important part or essential part of this?
Absolutely. Obviously somebody can live their life as an atheist or not believe in anything beyond the afterlife, and they can have a great life. But I think to really have the richest life, you have to let this light in. You just have to allow. It makes everything so much easier. You don't get caught up in the dramas. Bad things still happen around you, but you know how to respond to that. Instead of reacting to life, you're responding. And in my world of work, we consistently have periods where stock market valuations decline temporarily in this permanent uptrend that we've been in. And if people get caught up in that, they react to that. They're acting out of their reptilian mind. And when your mind is and blood vessels are constrained like that, you're not able to make discerning choices with your life. And so when you're in reaction, your environment controls you. But when you're in this state of calm waters and you're responding to your environment, now you control your environment. And that's the state of emotional intelligence that we want our clients to be in.
Yeah. And it sounds like from what you're saying, and I can speak to it personally, it is a journey. It takes time to know yourself. It is a long process. We could probably debate whether or not you ever fully get there, but it is a process. So how do people, if they start on that journey, but they also want to start to make better financial decisions and they want to be better with money or not make a lot of mistakes with money, how can they do both of those things concurrently? Are there any strategies on the financial side that you can tell people? Because a lot of the docs, they're in a lot of debt. They're staring at a big nut to crack when it comes to the mountain of debt that they are in. And we're talking up towards $1 million for some people of student loan debt coming out of school today. And so it's daunting and it consumes their mind and it can cloud your judgment and it can prevent you from finding your true self and finding that place where you can be your best. I feel for the people with whom I speak, that debt is so heavy that it is clouding their judgment and they're having trouble seeing past it. So what wisdom or advice would you be able to offer to those people?
So you have to respect your money matters, whether you have excess and you're growing it or whether you have debt and you're trying to pay it off. But what I would say is put a plan into place and don't think about it. I mean, what you focus your mind on grows. If you're thinking about your debt all the time, you're putting your body in stress. That doesn't allow your body to grow or your mind to grow. And now you're not at your practice at your very best. What you need to focus on is your practice, and don't even think about the revenues that's being created or whatever the debt you have. Because again, what you place your attention on is what you place energy on, and that's what appreciates or grows. And so I would just say, dedicate yourself to your work. Hand off that issue of money to your practice manager or to the wealth team that perhaps you've put into place. You know, I worked with this gentleman named Michael Cox. He wrote a book called Myths of the Rich and Poor, economic professor at SMU, and was the advisor to the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, Richard Fisher, for a period of years. He was even one of 8 people that was considered for taking Alan Greenspan's spot as a Fed chairman. But he has this saying, do what you do best and pay for the rest. So grind away at your work, your talents, your passion. Hand that ball off to your office assistant manager, and don't think about it. Don't think about it. And another talent that we can cultivate through the years is being an objective observer of our own selves, our own lives. You know, I feel like a lot of times there's somebody else in the top of the room here looking down on me at my physical motions, but at all times I'm witnessing what I'm thinking. And so when you start going that path and you're starting to catch a stressful thought, stop it. Stop it.
Are there any tricks on how they can stop it? And is it thinking about something else? Is it?
Just becoming aware of your thoughts every day. It's a practice, so that's hard until it's not. You know, I can meet you at a social on a Friday, and you can tell me I'm this great-looking real estate mogul, and I look at you and go, yeah, you are. And then the next Friday, I see you at the same social, and you go, you know, I feel like crap, and I can't sell a damn thing. And I said, yeah, but last week you told me you're this great-looking real estate mogul. And that gives you a moment to get back on your high horse again and remember who you are. You go, yes, I am. Well, the next morning when you're waking up and you're brushing your teeth, looking in the mirror, and your mind is saying to the guy in the mirror, you look like crap and you can't sell a damn thing. You've got to catch that. Nobody else can catch that thought. You've got to learn the ability to observe your thoughts 24/7. And just start somewhere. Start with driving down the street and somebody cutting you off, and what you would normally think, catch that thought. I mean, catch it on the simple things of life. Those are easy.
So start with the process of being more conscious of your thoughts. I like that because it can seem overwhelming. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, how do I stop the flow of all these thoughts? Or our inner voice is constantly talking to us.
Just start somewhere.
Start somewhere. Yeah.
Just start somewhere. You know, Miguel Ruiz wrote this book called The Four Agreements. Always do your best. Don't make assumptions. Don't take anything personal. And have impeccable word. And what I would add on to that is have impeccable thought. Thought becomes before the word.
And I also like what you said about having a plan. It's because I do feel I found in my own past that made it much easier working with my financial team, my financial advisor, the accountants, the attorneys, having a plan in place when I had no money and I had a lot of debt and my wife and I were just building the business. That can be very stressful. Starting a life, starting a family, starting a practice. Then the Great Recession hit right as we're starting in those years. And someone actually asked recently of how was it when for people who started a practice and that time, honestly, Jai, I didn't put a lot of thought and energy into it, to your point. My point was focus on what you're doing. Grow this practice. Focus on your patience. Economies prosper. You know, there's bear markets and bull markets. They go up and down. So for me, I need to focus on what I'm doing to advance my skills and be the best I can be for my patients, and the rest will take care of itself. I don't know if I could have done that if I didn't have a good plan in place first. And so I want to emphasize that part of what you said to people of have that plan where you look at what you're facing for debts, you look at your balance sheets, and you say, okay, this is what's here, this is what I've got to do, put the plan in place, and then act, right? And don't perseverate on those numbers and look at them every day, good, bad, and different, right?
Right. Yeah, I didn't suggest ignoring it, right?
Right.
I mean, because once you get it out and mapped out and planned out, at least now you have clarity and organization to it.
Yep.
And
True.
you have a plan in place. So I didn't suggest by not thinking about it that you should ignore it, but get the plan in place, get the clarity, organization there, and then go do your thing.
Yep. That's so true. So we've talked about a lot. What would be could you kind of give a little synopsis of if someone wants to go on this journey, they're feeling stressed, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling overwhelmed for whatever reasons. And I have a lot of lay people listen to the show as well. It's not just professionals. There's a lot coming at us in this world today. There are a lot of stimuli coming at us all the time. And it might seem overwhelming for someone who has very little time in their day, as they perceive it to be now, to take even 15 minutes of silence and quiet time. And I can speak to that because I was that person who literally, if you told me I have to take another 15 minutes out of my day, I'm not proud of this, but I would have said, well, then it looks like I'm losing 15 more minutes of sleep because I just don't have it. And I know there are a lot of type A pluses like myself who listen to this show who feel that same way. So could you encapsulate our conversation to summarize to them to say, where do they begin? Where do they start if they're feeling that ramped up, anxious feeling, that they're just on that wheel and it's going too fast? Or as Trevor Nichols, a friend and colleague who's awesome at putting things in perspective, talked about balancing all these different plates, right? And where do they feel like if those plates are just starting to spin so fast that they can't keep them from falling off? How can they start?
Well, you can't do this alone. I mean, I didn't develop my work alone. So find those parties that can help take 80% of that stress off your plate so that you can focus on what you can do really good.
Meaning like a team of advisor, financial team or...
Exactly. Because, at the cocktail parties, the big question is, what's the hot stock tip? And usually the hot stock tip eventually will create more stress and reduces your wealth. The cocktail party question ought to be, hey, who is your advisory team? Now, I'm not talking about the team being the 4 people at the investment house that are just doing investments. I'm talking about the investment people, the insurance advisors, the planner, the CPA, the attorney. These people need to be joined at the hip, and their busiest time of year should be in November and December of each year. That's when you're able to make material impact in your wealth world.
Yes.
And you need to have all that number crunching done and looking at all these different strategies at that time, not at tax time. You can do very little what's happened after the year passes. You're just accounting now. So yeah, get that team in place, get the plan in place. I mean, the plan is so necessary. But beyond getting outside resources and personnel to support you in that, wake up as early as you can in the morning. Find your favorite chair to sit in for 15 or 20 minutes and just close your eyes and say these 4 things to yourself. Who am I? What do I want? What is my destiny? What am I grateful for? And then sit silent for as long as you can. It's so elementary, but it's going to tap this human experience with the light that you've been incarnated into it from. And so a lot of people, and I'm glad you just said this, I don't have the time because I need my sleep. This morning, I wear this Whoop watch, and it tests all your vitals, right? It tests your light sleep, your wake up, your deep, and your REM sleep. My hour meditation this morning was measured in 100% REM sleep. So I can't give myself the excuse that I need another hour of sleep, because when I'm in meditation, I'm in my best sleep of the night.
Wow. Is that something you've heard other people say? Is that, or on any of the retreats?
No, I've never heard anybody say that their meditation was tested and scored this way. I just found this out for myself after having this Whoop watch for about 9 months.
Wow.
And you're in the best time.
You got to take it to Joe Dispenza, have him start to incorporate that into his research. Yeah.
But the best time to meditate is at 4 a.m. because that's when your melatonin is at its peak state. And so that allows you to, when you have melatonin at its peak levels, you're able to drop out of beta and into alpha and theta much easier when you have that type of frequency going on in your mind. So even if you're feeling a little groggy when you wake up and go, I'm going to sleep a little bit longer and then I'll meditate. No, get up and sit in that chair, and you're going to get the best aspect of sleep in your meditation state. And through time, you'll decide whether this is benefiting your life or not.
And how long does it typically take for people to start to sense something? And I know you can't give a definitive answer, but just in your experiences and from following Deepak Chopra and Joe Dispenza, have you found that there's a range that people can expect? And what maybe would they start to sense when this is working?
Well, I mean, today versus when I was started in 97, there's so many great tools that are available to us, right? A lot of guided meditation apps. There's a lot of apps that is hemi-synced, that has binaural beats and the frequencies that are bringing your both sides of the hemisphere in harmony. So, I mean, there's so many tools now to assist us in the easily dropping into the state and having experiences right away. I mean, it could be the first. I mean, I put my crew, I took them through a Dispenza training 3 days before he came and visited me several years ago. And the first 20-minute meditation that this trainer put us through, everybody in there had a profound impact. In fact, she said, how long do you think we meditated for? And everybody said, oh, about 5 minutes. But it was 20 minutes. And once you get past that beta mind, you're in now no time. And that's where the magic happens.
Interesting. And it's a wakeful state, correct? You're not asleep. You're in a wakeful state.
Now, you know what? There, on a rare occasion, somebody does go to sleep, but that just means they needed some extra sleep. So it was a productive meditation, even if you fall asleep.
Okay, good. So there are apps out there you do recommend that can help people to guide them in through this process, some of the guided meditation as well?
Absolutely. I mean, Dispenza has some on his website, Expand, which is by the Monroe Institute out of Charlottesville, Virginia. Bob Monroe has a great body of work out there, and he has a great app that I know is free. He also has a version of it that you can pay a little money for, but none of these apps are very expensive in life. And so I would encourage people just do a little bit of research on your own. Maybe you know somebody who meditates and check out from your resources what might be good for you. But just start somewhere and try it out. It's not going to hurt, because I do see it being a way for all of us to be able to heal in a great way.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time, for coming on. That was really an interesting discussion. It went off into some areas I didn't anticipate, which I love when that happens, because that's one of the most fun parts of what I'm doing now, where I'm able to have these conversations and let people in on and listen to a conversation that I would like to have with you, just the two of us having it, really, and share that with the audience. If people want to get in touch with you, get your book, how can they do that? How can they reach out to you? And if you want to say something about your book and what the overall theme of the book is, that's fine.
Sure. Well, you can find us at luminouswealth.com on our URL. And again, I encourage people to take the human archetype assessment that's in the banner there.
I'll put a link to that as well.
You can reach me by email, tim@luminouswealth.com. You can even call us at 561-919-4808. And the book that I finished about a year ago is called The Awakened Investor, and it's on Amazon and all different modalities, paperback, hardback, ebook, Audible. So it's easy to get there. But it basically is an observation of my career, and it explains what capitalism is, because most people don't understand capitalism. They associate it with Bank Street, Insurance Street, Wall Street, but these are just middlemen to capitalism, and we don't really need them. What we need is a team of fiduciaries that's going to place our interests as a family ahead of theirs as the professionals working from our family mission statement. And it also goes through and explains and shares how to unveil ourselves, because we're more than this physical clump of matter with five senses, and how to tap into that aspect of who we are, which is infinite. And so that's the essence of the book.
I love it. So great what you're doing. And I give you a lot of credit for not only doing it, but for sharing it, because that's the essence really, is to help others with your work. So,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you and what you're doing and how you're expressing yourself in your life, because, what I see that you're doing, you've taken your body of work that you would help many, many families, but now you're sharing these unique techniques with hundreds, if not thousands of people like you that will reach tens of thousands of people in the world. And so your light can spread even that much faster and beyond our imagination. So I appreciate the way that you're living your authentic life.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's been a fun journey, and getting to meet people like yourself and have these conversations just adds to it, and share this with others that I know it will help and keep that light passing. So thank you so much.
Right.
Jai Baker, been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Doc Podcast. Be sure to visit theorthocoach.com to get access to ADA CERP recognized CE courses, or to schedule a private one-on-one coaching session with me. Also, if you know of someone who would make a great guest for this show, or if you'd like to be a guest yourself, please email me at drmike@theorthocoach.com. And be sure to join the Doc community on Facebook for more great content. Thanks so much for listening, and always remember, you have been blessed with the ability to do amazing things.